MMA World and MMA UK. Please like our Facebook pages today if you haven't done so already. Very excited for this week's show. A lot of stuff going on in the world of combat sports and mixed martial arts and just martial arts in general. And if you are a fan of fight sports, and combat sports, which I'm assuming you are, this is the weekend for you. And I would highly recommend, if you don't already have a subscription to UFC Fight Pass, getting one, because it's going to be very beneficial in a lot of the events that are going on this week. And obviously it's going to start on Friday night with Bellator MMA. Bellator 194 is going to be happening on the Paramount Network, as well as the prelims on their website, I believe. It used to be Spike TV, but I'm assuming it's on the Paramount website or Bellator.com. So look up that, or the Bellator app, I believe, as well. So that's going to kick things off on Friday. On Friday also, there's Glory 50 from Chicago. That's going to be on ESPN3, the streaming website, as well as UFC Fight Pass. That's going to feature a welterweight title matchup between Myrtle Groenhart and Harat Gagorian. Going to be an excellent fight there. And then the Super Fight Series, that's going to be headlined with the lightweight title bout, as Sitsong Piang will take on Baya in the Super Fight Series main event. And there's a lot of good fighters on that card for Glory 50 coming from Chicago. That's going to be on Friday night. Then on Saturday, it's going to kick off with Polaris 6, which is one of the highest levels of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu competition, featuring the main event of Jake Shields, obviously former MMA world champion and a black belt in Jiu-Jitsu himself, against one of the rising stars in Jiu-Jitsu and just an absolute beast in Craig Jones. Also have former UFC champion Ben Henderson is going to take on one of the best no-gi grapplers in the world and former collegiate wrestler as well, in AJ Azargam. That'll also be a great women's Jiu-Jitsu match in Gazari Matuda as she takes on Serena Gabriela. Also, current UFC competitor and former Bellator standout Massine Held will take on Chris Fishhold as well. That's going to be the main card there for Polaris 6, coming to you from I believe it's from the venue Indigo at the O2 Arena in London. So that's Bellator 6. That's on UFC Fight Pass. Then later that day, also on UFC Fight Pass, you have EBI 15 featuring a 16-man featherweight tournament, featuring former featherweight champion Eddie Cummins, as well as bantamweight champion Gio Martinez, who famously defeated Eddie Cummins at the last tournament for 135, so that's a potential rematch in the makings. It's also going to have, I believe, a 4-person combat jiu-jitsu match in tournament as well, so that's on UFC Fight Pass. Very exciting for that. And we're also obviously going to have UFC Austin, which is going to have some events on Fight Pass, as well as Fox Sports 1 and Fox Sports 2. So a lot of stuff to cover. Very excited to do so. Joining me this week, my normal co-host Kayla Beatty, still transitioning her move to San Diego. So Kayla will be back shortly, but filling in this week is my good friend Lewis Smith. And we're going to get the cage rolling here for February 15th here on MMA World and MMA UK. And thanks everybody for joining me. Once again, I'm Jim Graham, and you can follow me on Twitter at Jim Graham. And here he is, Lewis Smith. How you doing this evening, Lewis?
I'm well, sir. How about yourself?
I'm doing great. I was just telling everybody, doing my usual intro, my usual spiel of all the stuff going on this weekend, telling people if you don't have a subscription to Fight Pass, this would be the weekend to do, or at least take advantage of the free week trial they give you. This would be the weekend to do it. So many stuff is going on.
It's definitely a big week for fighting and
kickboxing, MMA. I'm super excited for this weekend. This is the weekends I dream about.
Yeah, it's a big weekend this weekend. But yeah, thanks for having me on, Jim. I much appreciated. Sorry I'm annoying my usual spot this evening. Just come back in from work, but happy to be here joining you tonight.
Yeah, and also I want to give you a shout for those of you who didn't watch or if you didn't see, you did an interview with UFC fighter Brett Johns yesterday afternoon. It's still on the MMA UK and MMA World pages. If you haven't checked it out, I thought it was a great interview, Lewis, and Brett Johns obviously is an up-and-coming guy at 135. He'll be taking on Aljamain Sterling coming up here very shortly. Obviously a guy who pulled off a calf slicer, which I believe is the only one in UFC history as far as...
I think there may be one more, but I'm not sure who by.
Okay,
Have to check
if
on that.
it's not the first one, it's been a long time since one has been pulled off, and not that many get pulled off in MMA. And heck, as a guy who's trained jiu-jitsu, you don't see even many of that in straight jiu-jitsu competitions. So it was an excellent move, and he's a guy definitely to look out for. And that was great. You were able to chat with him about his fight.
Yeah, it's great to speak to Brett. I mean, obviously being from Wales myself, just sort of interview Welsh fighters is brilliant. There's not that many in the UFC at the moment, so always nice to sort of give them a bit of attention. And yeah, all the best to Brett against Aljamain Sterling. He's a great guy to talk to, and great to have him on last night.
Now, this is just for me because obviously I'm over here in Michigan and Detroit, and so obviously I don't know the UK scene as well, especially at a local level, as well as obviously you do. Do you feel as though there are more guys coming from Wales, or is Brett Johns just an exception?
There's a lot of upcoming talent in Wales at the moment. Obviously you've got Brett, who's burst onto the UFC scene now. Jack Marshman, John Phillips are both in there as well. But there's a lot coming up as well. I mean, I know Tulare Combat has got Jack Shaw, who's a really big prospect from Wales at the moment, making a lot of noise in Cage Warriors. So keep an eye out for him in the next couple of years. Jack Shaw is a really big name. Josh Reed, Chris Des Edwards as well. All big fighters coming out of Wales. Liu Long also is another big fighter. So there's a lot coming up from Wales. But it's not just Wales, it's all of the UK, I think. I mean, Scotland's got a lot of big fighters coming out. I think it's just everywhere. I think the sport's really taken off lately. And yeah, there's a lot to talk about nowadays.
Yeah, would you say I feel like there was kind of a explosion in the UK market kind of right after Michael Bisping won the Ultimate Fighter. They were doing events there with relatively routine, you could set maybe not set your watch to it, but at least every couple months it seemed like they were doing an event. And then it kind of seemed like around I'd say like 2010 to 2013, they kind of started to go away from the UK a little bit, and I think a lot of people started to kind of lose interest and not pay attention to it. And I feel like in the last 2 or 3 years, it's kind of come back up again. Would you kind of say that that's fair to say?
Yeah, I think so. I think there's a lot of different factors. I mean, obviously Conor McGregor has been a big factor, not just for MMA in the UK, but I think for MMA in general. He's brought so much attention to the sport. It really has made it a big deal everywhere. I think Cage Warriors coming back as well is also a big deal because obviously they do local shows all around the country, and that gives people sort of fighting on a lower level a chance to shine on a big stage. So I think that's also had a big effect on the UK scene. But again, I think the people have been there all along. I think it's just now there's a bit more exposure for them, really.
Thank you for the comments there, Stephen. Appreciate that and appreciate you tuning in this week. But we're going to start out the program here with UFC 221, which took this past weekend over in Australia in Perth, which was the first UFC fight on that side of the country. That's the the western coast of Australia. Getting confused there. 5 fights were shown on the pay-per-view main card. And before that, I would want to touch just real briefly on the undercard. Obviously, you had a big win for Jussier Formiga. He was able to take out Ben Nguyen, win his performance of the night, Botus get a submission. Also had a excellent performance, speaking of Glory, former Glory kickboxer Israel Adonijah making his UFC debut, looking like an absolute stud against Rob Wilkinson. Those were definitely the standout performances. Obviously, you had a veteran in Ross Pearson get a win. Luke Jumo, boy, what a comeback win he had. He actually got whooped by Abe in that first round and somehow was able to come back and pull off a decision victory. Very impressive performance by him, obviously in front of his home country there in Australia. But those were some of the performances that stood out to me. What did you think about the undercard, Lewis?
Yeah, to be honest, I didn't get a chance to see too much of the undercard. I was actually out on a night out in Manchester. It was Wales versus England in the rugby, which is a big deal for us. So I got back in time just to see the main card. I did get a chance to see Israel fight, which I thought was an absolutely amazing performance. I think there's a lot going on in the middleweight division at the moment, so to see some fresh talent come in is just absolutely amazing. And I mean, like I said, I think he had one of the performances of the night bonuses and thoroughly deserved. Also with Ross Pearson, obviously he's had a couple of losses recently, so really good to see him get back into winning ways because I think there was talk of perhaps him being cut from the UFC. But with another win, Ross is a veteran, and it's always great to see him sort of pull it out and get another win. So really happy for him as well.
Yeah, it was definitely a close fight, and I believe it was. I want to make sure I have his name pronounced correctly, Hirota. Definitely a guy I feel like probably a couple of years ago, Ross Pearson probably would have like mopped the floor with him. But at this stage in his career, you can tell Ross Pearson is definitely slowing down. That's not to say he's still not competent. He still can't be competitive, but you could kind of tell, like, you could start to finally see some aging on Ross Pearson.
Yeah, he's had a lot of big fights and a lot of wars. Ross has, so I mean, I think it's only natural. But like you said, I still think he's got something left to give, and I'm glad he got that win on the weekend.
And then, of course, once again, Damian Brown in another close fight, another fight he isn't able to pull out. I know a lot of people, obviously him being the home country guy there, a lot of people were upset with it. A lot of people thought that's not what they expected from Dong Hyun Kim, especially considering the fight he had with Polo Reyes not that long ago. But I remember seeing someone put, like, once you kind of been through a war like that with Polo Reyes, I don't know how quick you are to want to do that again. Yeah. And so I think that's one of the reasons you saw a more tentative Kim in this fight against Damian Brown, because he knew Brown likes that type of fight. And he's like, I already did that once. I ain't feeling that. And so I think that's why we saw a lot more reserved Kim, and that's why you maybe saw a little bit frustrated Damian Brown, because I'm sure that's probably not what he prepared for.
Well, Kim is another guy who's been around a long time, had a lot of fights, and he's fought the best of the best. So I think he's a guy who, I think he realizes if there's going to be another shot for him, he's got to start putting the wins together now at this point.
All right, let's get to the main card here. Again, the undercard, most of it is still on UFC Fight Pass if you want to check it out. But looking at the main card, it kicked off in the light heavyweight division with one of those Australian guys, Tyson Pedro against Sarabeg Sararov. And this fight it didn't finish how I thought, but it went how I thought in terms of Sararov not being a natural 205er. This is apparent now, 2 fights in a row, guy that, again, has fought the majority of his career at 185. I said this in the preview show. I wasn't sure why he took another fight at 205, and especially against the 205er, the size of Tyson Pedro. He is arguably the biggest guy in the division. This guy's an absolute monster, and you could just tell that he was trying his best. I mean, he tried 5 takedowns. 2 of them technically were successful, but he couldn't hold them there. He couldn't just deal with that size. And, he didn't get hit as much as he did against Jean Vellante, but eventually that size played a factor because Tyson Pedro locked up that Kimura, cranked it hard, and got the tap. And I thought that was a nice win for Pedro, because as someone that was pushing him in a different way, he had to adjust, and he had to work for that Kimura a little bit. He did. It wasn't like given to him. But nevertheless, his size is such an advantage. And if he can string in good submission skills like this, he can be a very dangerous guy instead of just a powerful striker.
Yeah, and in a division that needs a lot of new talent, because the light heavyweight division is struggling at the moment, I think, especially at the top end. So he's the kind of guy who can come in, put a few wins together, and people are going to be talking about him. I thought it was a really impressive submission, because, like you said, it wasn't given. I thought initially that he'd escaped from that Kimura, but as you said, he adjusted, got back into position, and finished it. I think at the end of the day, it would be better for him to drop down to middleweight now. I think he's going to have a lot more success down there. But yeah, Tabura, I think he's got a long way to go in this division.
Yeah, I'm very excited for Tyson Pedro. I would like to see him. I would say probably the best guy he's fought so far, probably Khalil Roundtree, which isn't saying much. I mean, no offense to Khalil. No, you know what? He did fight Latifi. That's probably the best guy he's fought. And obviously he did lose to Latifi. Yeah. So 3 of 4 is not bad. Obviously, beating Khalil Roundtree was impressive. He beat Paul Craig. I know a lot of fans here in the UK are fans of Paul Craig, but he was able to get by him there. Loses to Latifi, now beats the Russian here in Sarabeg. I think he's in the right direction, and I think he has to keep doing what he's doing. I think that fight. That's a good rebound after losing to a guy like Latifi, who's so much a grinder. I know people think, oh, he's explosive. He is, but he's explosive in spurts. He's not just going in their wing, and he's very much a grinder, Ilir Latifi.
What do you think is next for Pedro now, Jim?
Oh, man. I think, let's see, he already got by Roundtree. I honestly, if he didn't fight Roundtree before, I would say that's a very good fight for him. But I'm trying to look at the lower end of 205 because it is kind of sparse right now. It's probably the weakest division in the UFC. I think that's fair to say. I I would say, honestly, he could probably take on maybe like a Corey Anderson. I think would be a good matchup. Obviously, a guy that definitely is a grinder, a guy that definitely would test whether or not his wrestling skills are up to snuff. Or I would say even a veteran like Shogun, just because that's probably going to be a fun fight. Shogun's, even at this stage in his career, down to just throw bombs. So I think that would be a fun fight. And a stretch just because he is ranked a little high, but him against Ovince St. Preux, I think also would be a very intriguing matchup because I think they're both very big athletic guys. I think that would be a very good matchup as well.
I think OSP is a bit soon for him, but I would like to see him face.
I think it'd be a tad soon as well, Lewis. But I think skill wise it makes sense. Rankings wise, it maybe not make a sense. But again, this is a weak division, so I don't think you can be. If there's not that many guys, OSP's already fought most of the top guys anyway, and has lost to him. All right, let's see the next fight. What was that? Oh, welterweight. Okay, this one, I'll admit, I was on Twitter. I was kind of doing some live, reactions and stuff to this, and I was a little critical of the decision because I thought in Jake Matthews' last fight, he for sure got the hometown advantage. I don't think there's a doubt about it. I don't think he should have beat Bohan in his last fight. I think most people would agree with it. So when the decision came down, I was kind of like, man, the Leech had some pretty good attacks. I thought he definitely won the first round. Probably would have, the second round would have gave to Matthews, and the third probably would have gave to Lee. And then a lot of people were talking about the eye poke, and I was in the eye gouge, and I was kind of like, did I miss something? Did I not see that as well? Maybe my video was choppy. Maybe I looked away. Maybe I just wasn't in tune in that moment. So I had to go back, watch the video, and then I saw it. This was on the guillotine choke attempt there in the second round by Jake Matthews, and that was egregious. That's maybe one of the worst eye pokes in the history of the game, especially when you consider it wasn't just like a probing eye poke. It was clearly to get out of that submission. The referee not only did not take away that position, he let Lee stay on top and guard. He didn't take away a point. He didn't give him really much of a warning. And I feel like because there wasn't an official point takeaway, I think the judges kind of took it upon themselves to kind of almost give away a phantom takeaway point. And you can see why Jake Matthews won. But that's something where I feel like if a Mark Goddard, if a Big John McCarthy, if a Herb Dean, or a what's his name, Jason Herzog was in there, guys I consider the best in the game, something would have happened. A point, something nothing would have happened. I can tell you that. And I think that's the biggest thing to take away from this fight is you had to do something there with the referee, and that referee, I hope, gets somewhat of a talking to, because that was a horrible no call.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough for the referees because, like you said, when you're not in their position, it's easy to criticize, but when you're in there, then it's much more difficult. But, these guys, they have a very important job, and it's calls like that really can be the difference between people winning and losing and then going on to higher things. So, I mean, I don't know. It's a tough call with the referees, but I think, like you said, it probably was the case where the judges, it was in their mind, and that probably did play a factor in the end.
Oh, before we continue on with this fight, Peter wants to know who would win a fight between you and I.
I'll give it to you, Jim. You're doing your jiu-jitsu now. I think you take that at the moment.
I think in the gi, I would have you for sure. No gi can always get a little dicey because you don't have the grips. It's a little different world, and obviously if you're adding strikes to it too, that would probably. I'm already a white belt, so you start striking me, that'll make me like a super white belt. So that does happen. But yeah, no, it'd be fun though. As far as a roll, not an actual fight. But no, in this one, like I said, it was egregious because, like I said, it was clearly to get out of the submission. Lee, I definitely did it intentionally, and he lost the fight. And for Jake Matthews, there were positives in this fight, a lot of positives compared to his last fight at 170, and that's really what I was looking for the most. He was taking on, no offense to Bohan, but I think the Leech is a little better opponent he's a better overall skilled individual. So I think being able to go in there, mix it up, show some good hand speed, show some decent wrestling, show submission attempts, show he can go 15 minutes with a guy that hits really hard. I mean, Lee hits really hard. Yeah. I mean, ask Bobby Nash. So I think that even if he didn't get the win, he could hold his head up high, a lot higher, than his last performance. That's really what I was looking for Jake Matthews.
Yeah, it's a great experience for him as well. So he's only going to come off stronger from that. He got a win under his belt now as well, and yeah, I think he's a good fighter. And I think he's got a long way to go. Obviously, a very tough division, the welterweight. I think that's probably the most stacked division right now. But he's got another win, and onwards and upwards for him.
Peter says no polo next. I don't know. It's just the way this collar. I don't know. It's a weird collar. Does that suit you more?
Yeah, I think he goes. I think he's talking about the polo next. I try to weigh him sometimes, but not tonight. Tonight we're missing out. We're just in a.
I just got done with a workout, so I'm pulling my Brett Johns. He talked about his Adidas tracksuit, right? So I'm just. All right, our next fight, a heavyweight. Boy, if you want to talk about mismatches, this was a huge mismatch between Tia Tuivasa and Cyril Asker. I mean, this was just the butt whooping, the plain and simple. Tuivasa obviously is a guy that trains with Mark Hunt, so obviously a very tough dude to be sparring with that guy on a regular basis. Throwing Tyson Pedro, I believe, is in that same camp as well. I think they said they're brother-in-laws or something like that. So those are some killers there in that camp there in Australia. So for Asker, a guy that, as I said in the preview show, had trouble with guys that were big, powerful punchers. If you look at his other 2 losses in the UFC, they were both to big, powerful dudes, one of them being Walt Harris, who's maybe one of the biggest, powerful punchers in the heavyweight division. So taking on Tia, I knew it wasn't going to stand much of a chance for the man from France, and that's pretty much what happened. He was able to do what he wanted. He got inside, just started throwing bombs, and Asker had no answer for this one.
I don't think it was a mismatch in terms of the records, because I think they've got quite similar records, haven't they? But when he got in there, he just overwhelmed him, really. Really hard puncher. And, yeah, I think he's another one to watch out for, another heavyweight from Australia to watch out for. But, yeah, really, really impressive performance from him. Really scary guy, actually. So, yeah, I really enjoyed that fight.
I kind of was joking around with someone on Twitter. I said that Tuivasa should take on Curtis Blades next because he has to get revenge for his dojo, right? That makes sense.
It does. It does. It's a tough fight for him, though.
I don't know if what will happen, because Curtis may now get a higher ranked opponent, but in terms of kind of revenge and grudge match, and obviously they're just both really big dudes, I just think that would be a very intriguing matchup.
Yeah, it will be a good fight. To be honest, I think I'd have Blades in that one. I think he's turned the corner at the moment, Curtis Blades. I think he's obviously in the top 10 now. I think he's going to be looking up the division, to be honest, and I think he's a really good prospect. Tuivasa, though, I think a year or two's time, he could be up there. He hits so hard. Got a good personality. Got a whole country behind him now. I mean, obviously talking about sort of MMA coming on, the UK scene is huge in Australia now as well. They got a lot of fighters coming up. And he's just the latest prospect in that country, really. But yeah, really impressive performance, really hard puncher, and yeah, I wouldn't want to fight that guy right now.
What did you think was more impressive, his victory in the cage or drinking that beer from a random fan out of that boot as he was exiting the cage?
I mean, definitely the win, but the boot drinking was pretty impressive as well.
That's a first for me, and maybe back in the day, and obviously some local fights, probably even around here and around the U.S., that's something like that's happened. But I've never seen it at a high-level fight, so that was pretty impressive to me. I thought that was very cool, and I would say that's probably a very Australian thing.
They're crazy Australians also. Yeah, very Australian thing.
James Anthony wants to know why you sound Russian, Lewis.
James, I got no answer to that, mate. I don't know what to say to you.
All right, speaking of the aforementioned Curtis Blades and Tuivasa's training partner, Mark Hunt, this was a fight where we knew the X factor was going to be, can Curtis get Mark to the ground? Because if he can, he was going to have a supreme advantage, because we've seen Mark Hunt get out-wrestled before several times in the UFC. I know he likes to bring up the steroids against Brock Lesnar, but it still happened. It obviously happened against Stipe Miocic. And even though he lost, even Stefan Struve had a lot of success against Mark Hunt on the ground. And I think also, boy, what is this? His name is escaping me. I think that guy put him in an armbar. Boy, it was one of his first fight, not Christian Moorcraft. Sean McCorkle. I mean, for God's sakes, got him in an armbar. I mean, where's that guy? You know what I mean? So this is a guy who has been out wrestled before. So everyone knew that was going to be the advantage. However, the first minute of this fight, it looked like Mark Hunt was going to be able to do what Mark Hunt does and knock people out, do so very quickly, and then do a walk-off. However, Curtis Blades was able to recover, shoot in, change levels, get that takedown right about mid-level of that first round. Kind of make a case how you want to score that first round. I think I would have gave it to Mark Hunt because after that point in time, Blades just kind of laid on him. But after that, Blades kind of recovered. He got his second win back and was able to assert his will early and often, especially in that third round where he put up an incredible 6 for 6 in his takedowns and outstruck Mark Hunt 61-7, which you could probably score as a 10-8 round. That's about as dominant as it gets to get the victory by unanimous decision. 129-27, a 30 and 2 30-26s. So I think everybody was calling that a 10-8. This was a great comeback performance. It shows how big and strong Curtis Blades is because Mark Hunt obviously comes in right at that limit. What we all know, he cut weight. He routinely is walking around at 300 pounds. So I'm sure he was north of 280, probably close to 290, Lewis. And Curtis Blades was tossing him around like a sack of potatoes. That was awfully scary to see somebody do that to Mark Hunt. And doing so with adversity, I think was a big deal for Curtis Blades. And obviously he is a guy he's young. I believe he's in his mid-20s, obviously a former Division I wrestler, a guy who is improving in his striking, and he just showed that he can take a punch and have the wherewithal to change the fight in a different direction. So this is definitely a guy to look out for. And like we were kind of saying, probably going to get someone higher than Tuivasa, but it's somebody I think that the heavyweight division needs some young, fresh blood, and Curtis Blades represents that in a nutshell.
Yeah, I think it was a bit of a passing of the torch for that fight, to be honest, because obviously you've got Mark Hunt, who's got so much experience, a veteran, against a young guy in Curtis Blades. I think he's only 27, so I definitely felt like it was kind of the passing of the torch there. I think it's got to be the biggest win of Blades' career, and he looked really impressive. Obviously, got caught early on, took the shots, but went back to what he knew and out wrestled Hunt for the rest of the fight. Yeah, I mean, I think it's on to bigger and better for him now. Obviously, he's taking punches now from two of the biggest hitters ever in Mark Hunt. I think he got clipped by Ngannou as well. So, he showed he's definitely got a chin. He's definitely got the will to sort of be in there and survive. I thought he was gonna be finished for a moment when Hunt hit him, but like you said, he rallied, got back on track, and went on to win the fight quite comfortably. Really, I thought.
Absolutely. That, like I said, that third round was a 10-8. Yeah. I'm thinking he either gets a rematch with Francis Ngannou, which I would very much like to see, because let's remember that was his UFC debut on short notice, and he got injured in that fight. Mm-hmm. To me, that's all the hallmarks of a rematch. Then the other guy, I guess it depends on what happens coming up here, but Derek Lewis is obviously fighting Martin Tybura coming up. Right. I think the winner of that match could also fight Curtis Blades. Those would be, to me, the next two matchups for Curtis.
I'd like to see him fight Ngannou again, to be honest. I think that'd be the fight to make. I think they both improved since the last time they fought. And I think that's the fight to make right now. Being as they're both so athletically gifted, that's what I want to see, to be honest. And, again, going back to Blades in this fight, it was brilliant that he did it in Mark Hunt's backyard as well. Going out to Australia and taking a win, on away territory. It's a really big achievement for him and definitely a big feather in his cap. And I think that sort of turns the corner for him now. In terms of his career, so I would like to see him take Ngannou next, and I think that'd be a close fight.
James Anthony, should Hunt retire? I'm gonna be honest, James. I thought Hunt should have retired after beating Derek Lewis in the main event there. I think, was that New Zealand or I don't know. It was basically his home country, whatever you want to say. I think that was the way to go. He had his kids there in the cage afterwards. That would have been the fight to do it, and now he's held on too long. Because I think a lot of people knew this is probably what was going to happen against Curtis. He talked about he wants to fight out his contract with the UFC and then go elsewhere. I still don't think that's a good idea to finish out the contract. I know I'm not even talking about health reasons. I'm just talking about skill-wise and competition.
How many fights has he got left
You
on his
know he's
contract,
not
Jim?
fighting at elite level. I think he has. I think he said he had 3 fights left. So I think with this one now 2. So I believe
Yeah.
he's willing to take 2 more fights. And then it sounded like he wanted to fight in Japan for a few more with like Rizin or ONE FC or something like that.
Yeah, I think
So
it's a lot to ask at his age, but I think he's the kind of guy who's just going to go out on his shield. I don't think he wants to stop. I think he still loves fighting. Maybe he's going to have to learn the hard way, perhaps. But I don't know.
right,
I'd like to see him. I'd like to see him leave it now because, like I said, I think it was good that he took this fight because it has given Curtis Blades that sort of boost in his publicity, and it's a bit of a sort of passing on of the torch, really. But at the same time, it would be nice to see him go out on a win. Don't get me wrong, but I just don't know. I don't know if it's going to happen at the moment. I think maybe now's a good time for him to leave it.
yeah, I think so too. And I saw Dan Hardy on Twitter was saying, Mark Hunt maybe should consider going over to Glory. And I thought, as cool as that would be, first of all, I don't think he's into kickboxing anymore. I remember I interviewed Mark Hunt. I forget what fight it was for, but this was maybe less than 2 years ago. And that's right when I really started kind of paying attention to Glory. And I remember asking him, would you ever go to like a Glory? He was kind of like, I kind of already did that. I was already kind of world champ. He didn't really sound that interested at number 1. And number 2, I don't think Glory could afford Mark Hunt. Mark Hunt gets paid in the 6 figures. Glory is not paying out that type of money unless you're Badr Hari or Rico Verhoeven. And even that was a stretch. Like they really had to stretch their wallets to pay for Badr Hari to come fight Rico. That wasn't an easy get. People think, oh, it's just easy because of course Badr wanted to smash it. No, Badr wants to get paid. And Mark Hunt's the same way. So I think it'd be very hard for Glory to get Mark Hunt at an affordable rate.
Yeah,
because he's going to command a high price.
I don't think they could afford him, to be honest.
Same thing. I also heard rumors like years ago. Goldberg thought about the former pro wrestler thought about doing a kickboxing match with Glory, and he was saying like they just couldn't pay me what I felt I was worth, and it's just as much as he wanted to do it, it's still he still wants some money, and just they're not at that level yet. Yeah. Maybe they will be one day, but right now and it's just not a good business model to be shelling out all that for one. It really cripples the rest of your card. It really cripples your next couple of cards because now you just paid $300,000 for one guy. What were your returns? Usually they don't cover as much as the cost.
So if you were UFC matchmaking now, who would you put Mark Hunt against next if he's got 3 fights left?
I think, doesn't Arlovski have a fight coming up here against somebody?
Not 100% certain.
Isn't he fighting Stefan Struve or? I thought Arlovski had a fight coming up, but I would say I don't think Mark Hunt's fought Andre Arlovski, just because that's kind of a. Let me double check here. I don't think he has, which is kind of surprising. No, it doesn't look like he fought Andre Arlovski. I think that just kind of from a legendary standpoint would be nice to fight Andre Arlovski. I actually think somebody who's another guy that's a big, powerful puncher. I think Walt Harris would be a very exciting matchup as well. And then a lot of the guys that are kind of towards the top, I just feel like would smash them. So that's why I'm not saying more names. I think it'd kind of be like another like Walt Harris is kind of like a Curtis Blaze, a young up and coming guy. Yeah. I feel like that's probably who would taste, or maybe Arlovski, because Arlovski's kind of irrelevant at this point as well.
Yeah. I think Walt Harris would be a good fight actually, and it'd be another one where they could give him some attention because, like I said, he's another upcoming fighter. Trains with AK, I think Walt Harris, doesn't he?
I think he's done some cross training. I think he does a lot of training still at. I know he's from the South here. I want to say Alabama or maybe Mississippi, but yeah, he's an excellent guy, great boxer. I think that'd be an interesting matchup. All right, we got a couple questions real quick before we get to the main event. Joe, joking with you here, Lewis. Kayla isn't looking great this week. We have, how would have Goldberg done in your MMA? I think had Goldberg and a lot of like these other guys, Kurt Angle, Dave Batista, and even Brock Lesnar to some extent, if they could have got into mixed martial arts in their 20s, they could have done very well. But when they got into it, they were already in their 30s and past their athletic prime. So I mean, I don't know if I want to say world champion, but I think he could have been very competitive. I mean, that guy is a freak athlete. Can you imagine Goldberg at 25 fighting, MMA and UFC? He would have been kind of like Mark Coleman 2.0. I got to believe he would have been successful. Or even someone like Mark Kerr. I mean, that guy was a beast too. He probably could have. Same thing with Kurt Angle. That guy was an Olympic level wrestler. Do you think if he would have gotten MMA right after he won the gold medal, he could have done successful? Absolutely. But, they took different career paths.
Yeah, I think a lot of these guys, when they put their mind to something, they can do anything. But like you said, when you got time against you, I think there's an age limit, and unfortunately, a lot of these guys are past it now.
Yeah, and obviously the money wasn't in MMA then. I talked about, I kind of briefly brought up with the kickboxing. The money wasn't in MMA in 1996. A lot of these guys in the early 90s and the early 2000s, there weren't money there, so they took other options. Obviously, Lesnar and Goldberg obviously did professional wrestling. They tried their hand at professional football. Kurt Angle, did amateur wrestling, then made a transition to professional, much like Ken Shamrock. That's one of the reasons why these guys did that. It's because that's where the money was at. Would you rather get paid a couple thousand to get beat your face in, or would you rather get paid a couple million to act like you're beating someone's face in?
Yeah. No brain.
I think the choice is pretty obvious, right? I mean,
just out of curiosity, Jim, what do you think about CM Punk in a potential fight with Mayweather?
I mean, it's a better idea than him fighting Conor McGregor. I can tell you that much in a cage fight. For CM Punk, though, I think he should stick to fighting up-and-coming guys like himself. I think that's what was potentially proposed for him to fight in Chicago. While, yes, it'd be glitz and glamour, it would draw a lot of eyeballs to the sport. It probably would sell some pay-per-views. But I even think CM Punk would probably beat Floyd Mayweather. I feel like that would happen because if you look at his fight there against Mickey Gall is a brown belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, very high level, and was able to do that. CM Punk has been only training for like 2 years now, but that's still 2 more years in ground fighting and wrestling and 4-ounce gloves and hitting than Floyd Mayweather has. Floyd Mayweather has 0. Yes, he's an incredible boxer. I'm not taking that away from him. But you also got to, and CM Punk's a much bigger dude than Mayweather.
Yeah, he's much bigger.
I mean, Mayweather basically didn't cut weight for that fight against McGregor. He weighed in at 154. CM Punk struggled to get down to 170 against Mickey Gall. So if this was to take place, Floyd Mayweather has given up, 20, 30 pounds?
A lot.
And in grappling, where you can weigh that weight on, that's a much bigger difference than just boxing.
Yeah. It kind of makes me wonder as well how that fight with Mickey Gall ever got made, considering he's a brown belt and Punk's been in
with
the game
Mickey Gall
such a little time. How did they ever make that?
It
fight
kind of
happen?
is, but you can credit my friends in Ohio for that. for giving him the license, because I don't know how many states would have done that.
No, it's mind blowing that fight actually went ahead. Really.
All right, let's get to the main event. Speaking of high-class wrestlers, as Peter's pointing out, Angle had a fight with Lesnar and threw him around. But yeah, Angle definitely could have done some things had he made the transition sooner. But speaking of high-level wrestlers, Yoel Romero against Luke Rockhold. This fight was, to me, a very big fight for Yoel Romero in terms of his skill progression, because he was a guy that would explode very early and fade out. He had trouble really managing and pacing himself in the fight. In this fight, to me, he picked his spots very well. He knew Luke would have to fight tentative because he knew Luke can't come inside either to take a power shot or obviously the risk of getting taken down. So Luke was doing a very good job, I thought, especially in round 1, staying on the outside, doing that jab leg kick combo. Round 2, you saw Yoel start to become more aggressive. You saw a couple little flurries. You saw him in instances where he would come and Luke kind of looked terrified backing up, to be honest. You could definitely tell that he was worried. And in the 3rd round, all that time kind of waiting, getting the timing down, finding the right moment, he found it. He countered with that left hand over the top. A lot of people have pointed out very similar to Michael Bisping. A little different, but very similar. Countered it, grabbed Luke by the head, and then just wailed him with the uppercut. And that was all she wrote. That's one of the most, I'm sure you've seen the picture now, but talk about like barbaric, Viking stuff, holding the head, punching it. That's a picture right there. That's some dude you don't want to mess with. That's how you finish a fight. That's killer instinct people talk about. Romero has that, and that's how you put people away. And Yoel Romero did just that, and did so. I would say probably his most impressive performance in the octagon. That was a beauty to watch.
Yeah, that punch to the face, the one that finished it. God, that must be one of the hardest punches I've ever seen. Almost took his head off, I think, with that punch. But yeah, that fight actually went nothing like I thought it was going to happen. I really thought Romero was going to come out at a really high pace, like a bull out the gates, but he didn't. He paced himself. Rockhold fights how he usually fights, as you said, with the jabs, the leg kicks, staying on the outside. But I think once Romero sort of felt him out, he just realized that, it's his to take, and he started throwing a few body shots, backing Luke up, and then as soon as the opportunity came, he just dropped him, and really, really impressive performance. I think he's learned. I think Romero's actually getting much better in the way he paces himself now. I think that's going to make a big difference for him moving forward. Like when he fought Whittaker, I think he came out a little bit too fast. I think he gassed out towards the end. But in this fight, he looked so relaxed. He knew Luke would stay on the outside. And like I said, as soon as he got his chance, he started to go forward, started to throw some shots to the body. And then, if he hits you clean, then it's good night, I think. So, yeah, really good win for Romero. Bit disappointed that he missed weight because obviously he didn't take the belt because of that. But still a big win for him.
I think the miss weight, it's an issue because you never want to see a guy miss weight, especially in the main event. But it's not as big of an issue because, one, it was for an interim title. The belt was irrelevant. We all know why they made it an interim title, to save face of being the main event of a pay-per-view. So the belt thing doesn't really bother me. People brought up it was a short notice. It was short notice-esque because it was just basically moving up his fight camp 2 weeks. He was supposed to take on David Branch, I believe, on the 24th. So, I don't hold a lot of stock into it, but, whatever. He can't miss weight against Robert Whittaker. He didn't the first time when it was for that interim title championship. The dude had never missed weight before, and I don't know if he's ever missed weight even in wrestling competitions.
No, I don't think he has.
The guy's always made weight, so I don't take that big a deal. I don't take it as big a deal as other people. Another interesting thing about this fight, Lewis, 0 takedown attempts from Yoel Romero, which, as we hear Joe Rogan say on almost every UFC broadcast, what's the most exhausting thing to do in mixed martial arts? Try to take someone down. So he almost eliminated that from this fight. He took away the most strenuous part of the game and just kind of let it come to him. And so against Whittaker, remember, he tried 12 takedowns. So that's a lot more energy being expended, especially for a guy that is a very muscle-bound individual. There's nothing wrong with that. Just that's the facts. Bigger muscles take more energy to use. Again, Joe Rogan says that a lot too. So he took that part out and probably would said, unless it's given to me on a platter, I'm not going to take Luke down. And I think coming against Robert Whittaker, he has to have that very same type of game plan as late. It's unless Whittaker clearly, I feel this stupid overhand right, I might as well duck him and take him down. I don't think he's going to do it this time around. And so that's why it makes it so intriguing, their rematch for later this year, which I'm super excited for because it was such a great fight and such a great performance by Robert Whittaker the first time. Let's see if he can do it again.
Yeah, I think with Rockhold as well, he's so good off his back and so good on the ground. I think Romero potentially thought there's more trouble there than what it's worth with the takedowns. I think he thought that he'd be better off standing up. I mean, Luke, he's a great fighter, but he does drop his hands. He defensively isn't that great. Obviously, he's been dropped by Bisping, finished. He's been stopped again.
Vitor Belfort.
So I think Romero sort of felt that moment was going to be there for him to take that shot and get the finish on the feet. And I think the more he realized, the more he kept it there, the more opportunities he was going to have. So I think, like you said, he wanted to save his energy from the takedowns. Not really, getting down on the ground with Luke Rockhold is, it's a whole other world because he's got some great jiu-jitsu. So I don't think he's a black belt, but he's very close. Yeah. If he actually went through the steps, I bet he could get it probably very quickly because when he's on top of you, when he gets mount, you're not getting out of that position. You are done. You either are going to get pounded, or if you spin and give up his back, he will finish you. Yeah. It's just, that's how good he is. And obviously, he did so against Chris Weidman, a guy who
I believe is ranked in jiu-jitsu. And obviously he did against David Branch, who is a Renzo Gracie black belt. Those are two guys you would consider like, oh, those would be hard guys to hold down, right? And he was able to do so. But like you said, he has some technical flaws in his defense. I think because he's so tall, Lewis, he thinks that he can just angle his head out of these shots, and that's not a good defense.
Yeah.
You got to move your head or move your body out of the way. Just sticking your head up in the air. Junior Dos Santos did this in a lot of his fights, and that was one of the things, especially in the Cain Velasquez fights, is like, Junior, you can't just stick your head up. You got to at least put your hand in. And so I think Luke falls to that system thinking he can just kind of stick his head out of the way. And really up until kind of the Bisping fight, you can make a case Vitor Belfort was doing that to everybody at the time. You can almost kind of consider that like, all right, he fought the Buzzsaw, which was TRT Tour at that time. But he's never developed those skills. And at this stage, he's now 33 years old. He's not going to really change that. You can't really reinvent the wheel 20 fights in and you're 33 years old. That's just what he does. That's just how he fights. He has to kind of mitigate that. And if moving up to 205 helps that because he's fighting slower guys, quote unquote, I guess good on you. If that's just doing male modeling and not fighting, hey, go for it. But he's definitely at his crossroads in his career because he's not the same guy he was when he was champion after smashing Chris Weidman. He has noticeably, either you could say the division's caught up or maybe those flaws that, he was able to mask are now coming to light. However you want to look at it, it's just he's not quite the same guy he was just, 2-3 years ago.
Yeah. I mean, I would actually quite like to see him go up to 205. I think, like you said earlier, it's a division that needs a little bit of talent. Obviously, DC is going to be going up to heavyweight, so I think that's potential. Going back to his defense, I think he even got clipped against Branch, didn't he? Rockhold. So he's even got clipped in that fight as well. So it is known that he can get caught there. But yeah, I think Rockhold, I don't think going up to 205 is a bad shout. Obviously, there's a queue now at middleweight. I think Weidman's there, Gastelum's there. Jack Array, after his last fight, is going to be sort of in the mix as well. So I think he's dropped back a few spaces, and he's a big guy for middleweight as well. So I definitely think he could potentially go up and 1 or 2 wins in the light heavyweight division, and you're looking at a title shot maybe up there now.
We got a quick question from Stephen Peter. What both drew you to mixed martial arts? For me, it was seeing my first fight with Chuck Liddell and just seeing what that individual could do. Just intrigued me, and so I've kind of been a fan ever since. That was UFC 62 when he fought Babalu for the second time. That was my first ever fight I ever saw on pay-per-view. I was over a mutual friend's house, and that was 2006. Jesus, that was long ago. So I've watched nearly every UFC fight since then. In the last 12 years. I may have missed a few in between because back in the day they didn't show the undercards on TV. They showed one after the main event, and then the only way you could see them is because the illegal pirating wasn't as big. Stuff, YouTube wasn't as big, but is if you got the DVD. The DVD had all the fight. That was a lot of ways that was the only way you saw the undercard in a lot of cases. But boy, has it changed.
It's changed a lot. I think it was Chuck Liddell for me as well. I think I watched Chuck Liddell and Wanderlei Silva was one of the first ones I think I watched. And after that, I just started going back over it. Watching all the videos. And been hooked on watching it ever since. And about a year and a half ago, then I started working with MMA UK. So that's how I came to be here.
All right, that's UFC 221. Real quickly before we get to UFC Austin this weekend, this is just kind of a brief overview. I kind of said this in my intro. Obviously, and obviously you're a lot closer to it than I am, Lewis, but Polaris 6 going down at the Indigo at the O2 Arena there in London. Very excited. High-level grappling, the debut of Polaris in 2018 after probably their best year so far as an organization. They had a very good 2017. Their main event and co-main event, my goodness, super exciting. Jake Shields against Craig Jones in the main event. That's for their middleweight championship. Super excited. Grappler's delight right there. And then, of course, in the co-main event in a catchweight bout, you have former UFC champion Ben Henderson against one of the best no-gi grapplers in the world, Gracie Baja, black belt, and former Ohio State wrestler, and AJ Azargam. Super excited. I mean, there's some other good fights on this card, but man, those two fights right there are, if you love jiu-jitsu and you love grappling, it doesn't get no better than those four individuals right there. And then Polaris 6 for getting those individuals in a match, I think is excellent, and I'm super excited for those.
Yeah, I think that's going to be a good one. I'd love to get up there, to be honest. Like you said, London's not too far from me, only about a 3-hour drive. So, what was the date again, Jim, for that one?
It's this Saturday. Oh boy, I don't know. Did it show a time? It didn't show a time, but it will be on UFC Fight Pass.
Yeah.
So if you're not able to make it, it is on Fight Pass for everybody to take place. I'm not sure why it doesn't say a time. That's weird. I want to say if it's probably like the undercard. Let's see. Does it say a time?
7 p.m. Frankie Anderson saying.
Start 7 p.m. That was my guess, but I didn't want to just say that, Frankie, and get everyone wrong. But if you go to their website, it doesn't say on the website, so that's just me. But yeah, I think it's 7 o'clock UK, so that's 2 here if you're on the East Coast of the US. But very excited for that. I think in the co-main event, just real quickly, Ben Henderson, obviously, and AJ Askren, both tremendous wrestlers. I think the key is who's going to be more comfortable off their back, because I think Ben Henderson has a very good top game. I don't think he particularly is amazing off his back. I would say AJ probably is a little better since he's done more of the pro grappling circuit, so I think that's going to be interesting to see. That's where I would say this matchup would really play out. And then the main event, you have Greg Jones, heel hook city, baby. That's what he does. He is the heel hook master. Him very close to the Gary Tonins, the Eddie Cummins, and then the Danaher Death Squads, the Gordon Ryans of the world. And that's where Jake Shields has to look out, because if Jake Shields can get past those leg attacks, we know he has a very smothering top game. Yeah. That's his bread and butter. Now, unlike EBI, which is also this weekend, there is a winner after every match. It technically is submission only because there's no points to win given like a traditional jiu-jitsu match, but you can still win if you don't submit your opponent. So that's kind of the difference between EBI and Polaris. And also Polaris does one 15-minute round, whereas EBI does 10 minutes plus an overtime. So that's a little bit difference there in time. But I would say those are kind of what I'm looking at. So if you haven't seen any pro grappling before and you want to kind of get more in verse with that, especially when you hear these positions in MMA and you kind of want to see how they really work in jiu-jitsu and see how they can compare to MMA, this is the weekend to do it. But Polaris 6 definitely pulling out some great competitors for everyone to watch. Also, Masin Held is on the card as well.
Which do you prefer, Jim? EBI or Polaris? If you had to pick the rules into the rule set.
I prefer EBI because it's true submission only, and I really do feel like that is the superior form of grappling. I feel like Polaris is kind of stuck in the middle between the old way and kind of the new way. I think if Polaris did points in conjunction with it, maybe a revised point system, because I don't like the IBJJF scoring system. I feel like there are some things that don't work really well, especially like on sweeps and stuff like that. I don't like as much. So I feel like if they adjust the scoring system, I would like that a little better, because sometimes in EBI you get guys that just give up position, and because it's submission only, and so that's when you're training jiu-jitsu, you wouldn't train a beginner like me to like give up position.
Yeah, no, it's fair enough.
Just as far as the balance goes, but anyways, yeah. So that's Polaris 6, and then heading into EBI 14, that's a tournament. So that's a 16-man tournament. It's going to feature Eddie Cummins, again, the aforementioned former EBI champion. How they're going to set it up, Eddie Cummins is going to be on one side of the bracket, 8-man. Gio Martinez is going to be on the other side. These two last competed at EBI 10, where Gio Martinez pulled off the armbar in overtime to win the championship down in Mexico. Oh, my God, what a match that was. I mean, Gio was on the defense the whole time. He didn't want to get leg locked against one of the masters in the Wolverine, Eddie Cummins. They do the overtime where they switch between back mount or spider web, which is kind of like an armbar position. And Gio was able to get that armbar and get the tap in overtime. And even though as good as Gio is, a lot of people consider it an upset, because the only match Eddie Cummins had lost in EBI was to his training partner, Gary Tonin, which, I mean, there's no shame losing to Gary Tonin. Yeah. So other than that, Eddie had just rolled through everybody. And so that's how they're setting it up once again, this time at 145 pounds. And I hope that's what we get, Lewis. I really want to see that rematch. I think Eddie wants it. Gio wants it. That's what people want to see. I mean, if somebody upsets them, so be it. There's a lot of very talented black belts and brown belts in this competition, but I think that's what people are tuning in on Fight Pass to see is Gio versus Eddie.
Hopefully that happens, and fingers crossed, Jim.
And obviously I heard there's some rumblings that there's a dispute between Danaher and Cummings, so I don't know if that will play a factor at all, but very interested for that. So again, that's on Fight Pass as well. That'll be 7 here in the East, I believe, starting. So that should be fun too. All right, enough of that. Just that's some grappling news I want to pass along. And then Glory 50 this weekend in Chicago. Man, great main event. Harut Gregorian versus Mirthel Groenhart. The last time these two fought, you got the huge hook knockout. If you haven't seen it, go check it out on YouTube. Groenhart, I don't know what Harut was doing. I still don't know what he was doing to this day, Lewis. He kind of turned away a little bit, and that's fair game. You can't turn away from your opponent. And Mirthel hits him with that hook, and Gregorian goes out cold. Oh, it was a great knockout. And so that's the type of potential we're seeing. Gregorian is a guy that's very much offensive. I believe he has like an 85% career knockout rate. This dude is coming for you. He's offense. He's in your face. He's throwing home runs. That's all this guy does. Mirthel Groenhart is a guy that I feel like his game's really evolved. His win over Cedric Doumbé, where it actually was in Chicago this past summer, was a work of mastercy. Or was a masterful performance, I should say. And so very much looking forward to that. Then you'll have Sitsang Keong fighting in the main event of the Super Fight Series, taking on a new kid out of Angola by the name of Baja, who's 65-1, which still pales in comparison to Sitachai's 118, 30-5.
Not a bad record.
Yeah, this dude is an absolute stud. Sitsang has only lost once, and that was to former champion Robin van Roosmalen, which I hope that trilogy happens at some point. But I'm excited for that. Have you ever gotten to the Glory Kickboxing at all, Lewis?
I've not gone into it, but it's something that I've heard a lot about. The way you describe it as well makes it seem like something I'm definitely going to try and watch in the future, Jim.
Yeah, if you get a chance, like even if you don't watch it live, you get a chance to do even just the Fight Pass ones. A lot of good fights. Coming down on the Fight Pass card. The Fight Pass card, very stars. You got, Justin Houghton, Henry Morales, Casey Green. Obviously, the main event there for the lightweight title, I think, should be a treat. Sitsang's very much a technical Thai boxer. Really likes using that rear leg kick. And he's one of the guys that in kickboxing, you don't see this as much in MMA, but he actually will purposely kick your arms to make them tired so you can't punch. Not too many guys do that. And he does it, and he fights southpaw, and he'll go leg, arms, head, body. Sometimes he'll switch it to a knee, and that's his attack. He is just going to slowly wear you down until your body's sore. You don't feel that at first. You're just like, oh, I'm blocking with the arms. That doesn't count. Then all of a sudden you get that 4th round, 5th round. You're like, man, why can't I lift my arms? Why can't I punch? Because he's been hitting them all the fight. And that's what he'll do, and that's why he's such a weird guy to score, because – do you score him hitting on the arms purposely as a block, or do you count that as a hit strike? And so judges have sometimes had a hard time scoring, because that's a legitimate question. You would think if I hit your arms, I didn't really do what I wanted to do, right? Right? Because I didn't hit your ribs, I didn't hit your head, I didn't hit you, the meat of your thigh. But if I hit you 100 times in your arms are going to be sore.
I think they all count personally. That's just my way of looking at it.
So he's a very intriguing, very technical guy to watch. So I think that's great for everybody to check out Glory Kickboxing. Again, the undercard's on Fight Pass, and then I think it might be different for you guys in the UK as far as it's on like ESPN3, but I don't know the restrictions and stuff. You may have to buy it and pay. I don't know. Look it up. Maybe you can find a legal stream. I didn't say that, but maybe you can find something like that. But they usually replay it on ESPN3, so just look out for that. That's some other action this weekend. But so anyways, very excited for all that. And then right here in my hometown of Detroit, we have War Extreme Cage Fighting, which will be on Fight Pass next week. I'll be updating the live results for MMA UK. We got a big matchup in our middleweight division, Daquan Townsend versus Muhammad Abdullah. These guys are ranked 1 and 2 in the Midwest in the US for UFC guys. So this is a very big matchup. Daquan Townsend is actually coming off of a victory over former UFC fighter Hector Urbina, where he knocked him out in about a minute and a half. So Daquan Towns is definitely a guy that, and much like his opponent, Muhammad Abdullah, he trains with Dominic Steele, who used to fight in the UFC. He's on the cusp of, fighting in the UFC as well. The winner very much could have their next fight in the UFC or Bellator. Very easily. It would not surprise me. So, that'll be on Fight Pass next week. So check that out. And we have some of the other best up and coming fighters in the state of Michigan and the Midwest too. So, that'll be, I'll announce it. I'll let everyone in MMA UK know when it's going to happen, but it will be on like a video on demand on Fight Pass, but you get to watch the whole 9-fight pro card. So, all right, let's get to UFC Austin. Kicking off with the Texas boy, Sage Northcutt against Thibault Gatti, fighting out of France. Sage Northcutt obviously has moved camps. He did some training with TriStar for a while. He is now over in California training with the likes of Uriah Faber and Cody Garbrandt and such at Team Alpha Male. And I think that's a very good change for him because that's a camp of very strong wrestlers. Sage is not a strong wrestler. He's a good karate, taekwondo guy. So I think that's and obviously guys around his weight. And obviously this is at 155, which even though he's a good size 170, he's a monster at 155.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no doubt about that. And he's taking on Thibault Gatti, who I think is a solid fighter. I think does have some skills. I think he's a tough guy. But, I mean, he got his last one over Andrew Holbrook. He did knock him out, which I would say is kind of an upset. I don't think a lot of people had him beating Andrew Holbrook.
It was the head kick, wasn't it, that he knocked him out with?
Yeah, and I think that surprised a lot of people because his first couple fights in the UFC, not only did he lose, which is one thing to lose, but he was getting finished. And that's never good. 3 straight finished losses, he was able to then kind of upset Andrew Holbrook. And so do you kind of go, is that a fluke? Is that the real Thibault Gatti? Because as we know from Sage Northcutt, he's a very dynamic striker. He's very hard to prepare for, and he can hit hard. I think he asked Mickey Gall. Even though Mickey Gall won that fight, he got clipped.
Yeah, he dropped him.
So this is going to be a very interesting fight because I'm not sure if Gowdy – nothing has really showed me that he can deal with someone at that level of striking of Sage Northcutt. And I really haven't seen much from him grappling-wise to be like, oh, he could just take Sage down. I really haven't seen that either, Lewis.
No, I mean, with Sage, I think he's been around a lot of different camps now. He was up in TriStar. I think he went to Milwaukee with Anthony Pettis. He's done a lot, obviously, now being at Team Alpha Male. Obviously, a lot of great guys there. So I think with all that experience, he's still very young and still learning as well. I think he's gonna sort of look to come out of his shell a bit in the next couple of years. As for Gotti, I don't want to say it was luck, but like I said, he's lost a few before that, and I think this is a case of good matchmaking for the UFC in favor of Sage Northcutt, really.
Yeah, and obviously his last fight, I thought Sage looked really good this past November against Michael Quinones, if I said that correctly, winning that unanimous decision. I thought he showed a vast improvement in his game. And again, at 155, that's where he hasn't lost. Yeah. His 2 fights that he's lost in the UFC were both up at 170. Now, I get it. Brian Barberina's a 155 too. Yeah, I get it. Mickey Gall's talked about fighting at 155, but it was still at the higher weight when those losses have come. And as we know, Mickey Gall is a really good fighter. I think that's fair to say. The guy has some skills. So, no shame in losing to those individuals. But, he came back nicely after, a little bit of a layoff, about a year layoff. I think that was a good for him. He got to really train, focus on his game. And I think that in this fight, I think we're going to see, if people kind of forgot about Sage Northcutt, I think they're going to be reminded very quickly of what this young man is capable of.
Yeah. Do you think Sage got into the UFC a bit too soon, Jim?
No, I would say his hype was maybe too quickly. I think that kind of, he kind of had those fights right, and then all of a sudden he went up to getting paid like 40 and 40. Yeah. Everyone's like, how are you paying this dude 40 and 40? And so I think that he got some unfair criticism because here's the thing. If you were offered 40 and 40, Lewis, instead of 10 and 10 after 2 fights, would you say no?
No, for definite. I would be taking that 40 and 40.
You know what I mean? Like, what would you do? Would you be like, oh, I don't deserve to get paid a potential $60,000 more a fight? Come on. Who's saying no to that?
No.
So I don't blame the kid for taking the deal. He took the deal, but it came with a share of criticism. because there had been guys who had fought more fights than 2 and haven't got to 40-40 yet. So I think that was the shame, the fact that the payouts are known, and that kind of got on him. And, he fought a couple guys that definitely obviously were better grapplers. And, but he's 22 years old, not even 22. I think he's 21, 20.
21, I think. 21.
He just is now able to drink. He's 9-2. He's 3-2 in the UFC. The guy did almost no grappling before the age of 18. He just did straight, karate tournaments and stuff. I think you gotta give the little kid a break. I've interviewed the guy. He's a very nice guy. He's a very positive guy. He's a hardworking kid, and I don't know how you can't like the guy. He kind of reminds me of he's like MMA's Tim Tebow. You know what I mean? He probably has a higher ceiling than Tim Tebow, but I kind of liken him to Tim Tebow.
Yeah, he's a very nice guy, and he seems like he works hard. I'm sure he was training with Tyron Woodley as well, for Tyron Woodley when he fought Wonderboy Thompson. So, he's had some good training, and I think this could be a big fight for him on the weekend.
I'm excited. Obviously, he's fighting in his home state of Texas.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to be a big deal for him as well. All right, next fight of the evening, Steven Peterson against Brandon Davis. Steven Peterson, the guy that was featured on the Dana White's Contender Series this past summer, which I'm very much looking forward to coming back this summer. I was very excited for that. He's also known for having that Superman tattoo on his chest, so I'm assuming we know who his favorite superhero is. He also is a brown belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, so that's pretty impressive as well. Despite losing the split decision to Benito Lopez, it was just such an incredible fight. It was hard not to give a guy the shot, and obviously Benito Lopez has fought, I believe, a couple times since then, but very excited to see Peters make his debut. Brandon Davis is a guy 8-3 so far in his career, fighting now out of Mississippi. He is so far 1-1 in the UFC. Won his first fight against the very tough Austin Arnett. That was also on the Contender Series, so 2 Contender Series guys. And then made his debut against a guy I would consider pretty good in Kyle Bochniak. Not a very easy matchup. Wasn't able to get the win, lost by unanimous decision, but Bochniak is very much a grinding individual. And I would say Steven Peterson, from what I saw him in the Contender Series, is not that. So I think we're going to see a pretty action-packed. I believe this is a bantamweight fight, right? Or featherweight fight. I think we're going to see a very action-packed featherweight fight. And I would say the difference, I didn't see it a lot in that fight there against Lopez, but I would say the X factor would be how much Peterson uses that jiu-jitsu. Yeah. If he really just looks to use his Muay Thai. Because I would say if it's just striking, I would say it's pretty 50-50, Lewis. But that's the X factor, is how much Peterson will use his brown belt skills.
Yeah, I think it all depends on where the fight gets taken. On the feet, it's a toss-up, really. Could go either way. But on the ground, I think you definitely have to favour him. To be honest, I'm not too familiar with either guy. I've seen Peterson, obviously, on the Contender Series. But I think it all depends on who's sort of moved on in their game and who can put the fight where they want it, really, when it comes to this fight.
I think it's going to be an exciting fight, though. I think this is going to be a good scrap. I think, like I said, the X factor is going to be if Davis starts to not feel he's the better striker, what does he do? Does he really want to shoot in on a brown belt guy?
That's the thing, is where does this fight go? It all depends where it takes place.
Right. All right, let's get to the next matchup here. Longtime UFC veteran Thiago the Pitbull Alves taking on Curtis Melander. Obviously, Pitbull was supposed to fight, was that back in Pittsburgh? I think there was something going on. I think there was an injury. He didn't get the fight booked, if I'm not mistaken. I don't think it shows a canceled fight, but I feel like he was going to fight earlier this year.
I think he got pulled for something. I can't remember off the top of my head what it was. But again,
wasn't there something involved with the hurricane?
I can't remember. I remember he was
Oh.
scheduled in, and then it never went ahead. I can't remember or if it was something else. But yeah, he was pulled off guard for something, or potentially his opponent.
Let me look that up here real quick, because that's gonna bug me if I can't figure figure it out. Oh yeah, so that was this past fall in September. There was the hurricane in Florida, and that's his bout got canceled against Mike Perry. Then he was supposed to fight Zach Cummings in St. Louis, but Zach Cummings cracked his head on the bathtub, slipping, and that fight got canceled, which is insane.
Yeah.
So that was the fight. So now fighting Curtis Milliander 14-3. Okay, that's what it was. So two kind of crazy situations you never, expect to happen. Curtis Milliander is a guy that's fought a lot in the regional scene, most notably with Legacy Fighting actually becoming their welterweight champion. He's been on quite a roll since his his third pro loss back in 2015. He has since won, 6 fights in a row, with 3 of those coming by knockout, including his last 2, which were both in defense of his welterweight championship there in Legacy Fighting, which is pretty impressive. Obviously, one of the bigger regional promotions here in the United States, really does a great job of covering the Southwest, and now with their merger with RFA, getting kind of into that Midwest, Pacific Northwest market as well. So this is a guy that's definitely going to be a tough guy. I think people have been mentioning for the last couple of years about being a potential star in the UFC. He certainly says the size, Lewis. I mean, 6'2". He has a 78-inch reach.
Yeah.
This guy, he's a big, strong, hungry guy. And obviously he's taking on a guy in Pitbull who we all know is strong. He's big, but big in a different way. He's not a very tall individual at 5'9". And obviously a guy you would for sure is on the downside of his career. And even though taking on a newcomer in Milliander, you got to believe the physical tools Curtis brings to the table are going to present a lot of problems for Thiago Alves. And I think this matchup is going to be a lot closer than people think, because a lot of people, casual fans, are going to go, oh, Thiago Alves, he's been around for years. He's going to mop the floor with this kid. But I don't think so. I think this is going to be a very competitive matchup.
I think momentum's a big thing as well. And like you said, Millender, he's a champion in another organization. I think it's a 6-fight win streak. He's fought in Bellator as well. So I think he's definitely got the momentum with him. He's young, he's younger, he's hungry. And I think this is going to be a good fight. Like you said, obviously Alves is a veteran. He's been around for a long time, and he's not going to want to take a loss either, especially to a guy making his UFC debut. So this is going to be actually, I think, one of the fights to watch out for on the night.
All right, let's get to the next fight of the evening. James Vick against Francisco Trinaldo. Boy, this is going to be a very exciting matchup. We all know James Vick. He's swinging for home runs, kicks, punches. I mean, you want to talk about big dudes. Talking about a 6-foot guy at 155 pounds, or 6'5", or whatever the heck he is. He has a 6-inch height advantage over Trinaldo. That's insane.
Yeah.
This guy, he hits hard. He could take a punch. And he's fighting in his home state. He's the Texas-cutioner. There's nothing he loves to get an old-fashioned scrap. That's what he wants to do. Trinaldo, I would say, is a little more methodical of a guy. Very good striker in his own right. Definitely is the better grappler. Though James Vick, he's a guy that even if he gets taken down, he doesn't just sit there. He is hitting you with something. Like he's very active in his guard. I would say the key to watch is if Vick gets his guard passed, what can he do? How will he can control Trinaldo? Because Trinaldo is a very good grappler, very good top game, and that's kind of where I see this matchup taking place. I think Trinaldo, while yes, could probably stand, maybe eke out a decision, I think the path of least resistance, the path of not getting finished the most, will be to take this fight to the ground and try to mitigate a little bit of that long frame of James Vick. But either way, like I said, Vick he's hunting for something everywhere he goes, and I think he's going to make this fight exciting no matter where it takes place.
Yeah, both, as I said about momentum earlier, both guys are off the back of big wins. Obviously, Vick fought Duffy recently, took a big win over Duffy. I think
that was a huge win.
And a really good win as well. And obviously, Trinaldo, I think his last fight was against Jim Miller, where he got a really impressive victory. So both guys are coming off big wins, and I think both guys are going to go in there confident. For me, I think James Vick is the younger guy. He's a bit more hungry, and with the size advantage, I think he can make that play to his advantage. But I mean, Trinaldo, is he the most scariest guy in the UFC? when I look at him, he literally like he scares me to death. So I don't know.
He's good. I mean, he's won 8 out of his last 9 fights. James Vick's won 3 in a row, all by finishes, with the last 2 coming by knockout. He also has that submission win over Abel Trujillo. And then, like you said, he was very dominant, Trinaldo was, in his win against Jim Miller. Nice bounce-back victory after losing to Kevin Lee, a fight where he had success but got caught with that head kick, and then Lee was able to follow it up on the ground, locking in that submission. That was kind of almost the coming out party for Kevin Lee. I think if people didn't think Kevin Lee was legit at that point in time, they found out very quickly that he very much is. And so, like I said, that's really going to be the difference. I think Trinaldo felt what kind of head kicks can kind of do. I think he was able to get by some other guys. You know, look at some of the guys he fought. I wouldn't say he's incredible, powerful strikers, maybe except Leandro Silva, but Akbar Areola, Norman Park, Chad Laprise, Ross Pearson. I guess probably the Yancey Medeiros. I mean, we all know Yancey. He's in the main event. Obviously, a guy that has done very well fighting up a weight class. But I think against James Vick, I don't see him toying around with that. I think he's very much going to go into grappling mode. I don't think he's going to really want to test the power of James Vick.
Yeah, Vick is a really dangerous guy. Going back to what you said about Trinaldo, when he fought Kevin Lee, he actually had a really good first round against Kevin Lee. People kind of forget that because he lost it, but he tagged Kevin Lee a few times and looked really good in that first round against Kevin Lee. So he's definitely going to be the more experienced guy. But I've got a feeling for James Vick in this one. I think he's on a big roll, and I like James Vick for this one.
All right, let's get to the co-main event of the evening. Marcin Tybura against the Black Beast, Derek Lewis. I don't know if there's anyone more entertaining on social media than Derek Lewis and in post-fight comments. This dude is, oh my gosh. I mean, I don't know what to say about this. I mean, that Travis Brown fight when he was like, oh, I didn't really get hurt. I just had to go to the bathroom. And then, talking about Ronda, and then that thing with Paige Van Zandt. I'm such an idiot. But then you think, oh, this guy's just a jokester. Hurricane Harvey hits his hometown of Houston, and he saves 30 people from flooding in their homes.
Yeah.
So I think you take that. This fight's in Texas. He's at home. Hopefully he has his back pain under control. And if all that is well, he's in the right mindset. Derek, I don't see how Tybura wins. I'm sorry. I mean, I wasn't that impressed with Tybura against Andre Arlovski, a guy we've noted earlier, Lewis. Not really relevant right now. I mean, that's just the way it is for him at this career. He lost to Fabricio Verdum. Yeah, but he didn't do anything really against Fabricio Verdum. He never was threatening Fabricio Verdum. And now he's taking on Derek Lewis, who I think will eat any punch Tybura throws at him. And even if it goes to the ground, as we know, Derek Lewis will just bench press you off of him. Yeah. That's just how strong he is. That's what he'll do. And his power, I mean, I'm going to be honest, maybe that's giving my pick away and I'm fine with that, but I just don't see what Tybura does to really give Derek Lewis a problem, especially in a 3-round fight. Let's make that clear. This is a 15-minute fight. 5-round fight, I more likely could say, yeah, I could see how Tybura could grind out a decision because Lewis has to pace himself. 15 minutes, Derek Lewis ain't pacing crap.
Yeah, no, I think Derek Lewis has been working on his diet as well, hasn't he? I mean, going back to how much of a legend this guy is, I think there's a picture of him eating like ribs and like chicken and just before he stepped into the octagon for one of his fights. So, I mean, he's a crazy guy, but I mean, beneath it all, I think he's a super athlete. I think he's really talented. I think he's the kind of guy, if he puts his mind to it and really gets his lifestyle in order, he could really go a long way in that heavyweight division. So, I'll be giving my pick away as well. I think Derek Lewis for this one, especially given that his hometown. He's had a long time out as well to sort of prepare and get himself ready for this one. He lost last time out to Mark Hunt.
And I think especially that way that fight went, Lewis, I don't think that if he could do it over again, that's not how he would fight. I think that was not what we expected from him. And I think he kind of wants a do-over. Yeah. And that's another reason why I think he's going to be looking to hurt maybe even more than he usually does.
Yeah.
And that's why I would not want to be Marcin Tybura.
No, he's an animal. He is an animal. I think when you saw him against Mark Hunt, he looked good in the first round, but he used up too much energy. He's a big guy.
Yep.
Obviously super athletic, but you know, like we said about Romero, you know, the bigger the guy, the more muscle, the more energy it takes. So, I think he's another one who's going to start to learn maybe to pace himself a bit better now. He seems to have got his diet in a bit better order, and I think he's going to have one of his best fights. Like you said, I think he wants a bit of redemption for that Mark Hunt loss, and yeah, hopefully we'll see him do that. I'm sort of agreeing with you. I don't see really where Tybura hurts him, to be honest.
All right, let's get to this main event here. I think this is going to be a fantastic fight. Obviously, Yancy Medeiros coming over in what my opinion was the fight of the year against Cowboy Oliveira right here in my hometown of Detroit for UFC 218. Rebounding that now against the Cowboy Donald Cerrone. Obviously, two guys kind of going in opposite directions right now, Lewis. As Donald Cerrone, you can make a case his stock is down. Yancy Medeiros' stock is up. Obviously, Cerrone did not look very good in his fight against Darren Till, getting knocked out in the first round. Before that, obviously, a close fight against Robbie Lawler, but nonetheless a loss to the former champion. And before that, getting absolutely kind of mollywopped, to be honest with you, against Jorge Masvidal. That's now 3 straight losses, 2 of them by finish. Whereas you look at his counterpart in the Hawaiian, Yancy Medeiros, this is a guy much like Cerrone, moving up from 155 to 170 and has definitely looked rejuvenated. Obviously, his last fight at 155 was to the aforementioned Francisco Trinaldo, but since then he's submitted Sean Spencer, which was off a head kick. I was there for that fight in Cleveland, so you can make a case that's kind of almost a knockout. Then he knocks out Eric Silva, and now has the fight of the night, huge comeback against Alex Oliveira, knocking him out in the 3rd round. Very much momentum is on the Hawaiian side.
Yeah, I think, to be honest, obviously they both came up from 155, but I think he's done better in coming up. I personally don't like Cowboy Cerrone at welterweight. That's my opinion. I think he's big enough for it, but I always feel like he's physically outmatched when he's fighting these guys. And not only that, with this fight coming up, I think Yancy Medeiros likes to get into it. And for me, from what I've seen with Cowboy in his last few fights, when he gets hurt, he doesn't come back. And I think that's going to be a tactic from Medeiros, is that he's going to go after him, try and maybe draw him out into a bit of a slugfest, because he has that confidence in his chin. So I think, this is going to be a tough one for Cowboy. Personally, I'm a big fan. I think Cowboy's skill set is a more well-rounded skill set, but I just think at 175 or 170 even, I think it's a bit much for him personally.
Yeah, and the thing is, Cowboy very much likes to settle into his fights. And throw punches and bunches. I know people like to throw out, he has a lot of knockout victories. He does, but they're not from punches. They're from kicks. He has great kicks. If he's going to knock out anybody, it's with a kick. He's not knocking out people with his hands. And I think that's the big difference in this matchup is Yancy can knock you out with his hands. And even in a 5-round fight, he's very much coming at you. He definitely has a more aggressive style. Cerrone really has to be on his counter game, which he's capable of doing. We've seen him do this, but can he do it now? His confidence is maybe a little bit shot. He's not fighting to the best of his abilities of late. Is he still mentally, again, a guy that's been in the game for a very long time? He's come very close to a championship on several occasions. How much drive is left in him? In a 3-fight losing streak, I think those are all very good questions to ask of Donald Cerrone and ask if he's still ready. Whereas, like I said, someone like Yancy Medeiros, a guy who hasn't fought for a championship, a guy who's very much rising in the stock, coming off a great performance, he's going to be ready to go. This is his first main event. He's going to be coming out ready to go, and he's going to make it a very interesting fight. The one thing I would say is kind of a negative for Yancy, he took a lot of shots in that fight against Alex.
Yeah, he did.
This is kind of a quick turnaround. That fight was December 2nd. We're now looking at, February 16th. Did he have enough time to recover? Will that affect him at all in this fight? The damage he took, and obviously adding in now it being a main event, a 5-round fight, something he's never had to do before. How is that going to factor in against a guy who's been there and done that in terms of main events against Donald Cerrone? So I would say that's the only negative for Yancey is, did he have enough recovery time? Obviously, Donald has. That fight was in, September, early October against Darren Hill. So he's had enough time to recover. He should be ready to go, but that's the only kind of little bit question mark I have for Yancey, is whether or not he had enough time to recover.
I think, although Cowboys had the time, I think it could be the same for him, though, because that was a nasty stoppage he took against Darren Till. He ate a lot of shots. And I think the thing is with Cowboy, he's so tough, he loves to war, but I think sometimes he's his own worst enemy with the fights he takes. I know all the opponents he's faced have been really top quality. Darren Till is a great fighter. Lawler is a former champion. Masvidal. But I think there's got to be times where he picks his fights more wisely. I think this is a good matchup for Cowboy stylistically, but I also think it's a very dangerous one. And like you said, I think he'll go into it as favourite because obviously, like you said, he's much more experienced. And I think this will be taking place mostly on the feet, but it's a very dangerous fight for him.
Real quickly, before we get to picks, Lewis, I almost forgot to mention Bellator 194 is this weekend. I think I mentioned it earlier. Obviously, the main event's Matt Mitrione against Roy Nelson. Also, a good fight at 55 between Patricky Pitbull and Derek Campos. Also, Liam McGarry makes his return to the Bellator cage. Also, the return of Heather Hardy following her first pro MMA loss. She'll be taking on Anna Hulatin. Obviously, I'm sure you're probably excited to see Liam McGarry, but what do you kind of think of this Bellator card, and how do you think the main event's going to play out?
To be honest, I'm not that clued up on it, but I know the main event is Big Country Nelson and Matt Mitrione. I am right in saying that? Yes. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that one, actually. I think Mitrione's going to get it this time.
You think Mitrione will get the rematch?
Yeah, I think he's going to take it this time. I mean, he might get caught with one of those Big Country bombs, but I think he's developed his game enough where he can get a win there.
Yeah, the X factor, though, is if Roy Nelson decides to use his grappling game, which we all know is very good and at times can kind of be boring, like he did against Javi Alila in his Bellator debut. So that's kind of the X factor, because he didn't have to do that the first time he fought Mitrione. Mitrione was young, green. He threw one of his home run swings. Yeah. Got it. This time around, I think it's going to be a little different. I think Roy Nelson, now being older, realizing how many hits he's taken over his career, I think fights a lot differently. So I think Roy Nelson may try to grind out a decision victory. It's whether or not he can do so without getting clipped first.
Who are you going for in that one? Who are you picking?
I think I'm going to take Mitrione as well. Yeah. I think riding the momentum off of beating Fedor Emelianenko is incredible. It's going to be incredible for him. And then, like I said, I'm excited to see Heather Hardy, because even though she lost her last fight, both her fights have been super entertaining. So I'm very much looking forward to seeing her fight again. And I'm also excited to see Liam McGarry get going, because, he rose to the champion. He had what I consider a very kind of wipeout loss to Phil Davis. So I'm really excited to see him get going, because I feel like Bellator has been able to pull some decent competition together. And, his last fight, I didn't think he looked particularly well against Linton Vassell. So, where is Liam McGarry at? Because he's a very talented individual. He's super long. He does have some submissions, but, he now is 35. Is his head still in the game? Because he's got taken out by some very powerful grapplers in his last couple of fights. So I kind of want to see where he's at and see if he's still with us and still can fight at that level, because he's a very entertaining individual. And I think a guy, we talked about the UK market a little bit earlier, Lewis. I think he's a guy that's very much important for Bellator expanding into that market, which they've been trying to do the last 18 months. Yep. And if he can't get going, I think that's going to hurt, their cards coming over there. Yeah. And I think you would agree.
Yeah, I think to be honest, like you said, where's his head at? He's definitely got the talent and the potential to get back up to the top, but it all depends where he's at in his head with it, really. No shame in the losses he's taken, but it's whether or not he can bounce back now, I think, with Liam.
All right. I had to mention it because got to mention it cover, but I will be watching that as well. But all right, let's get to UFC Austin FS1 this Saturday, 9 in the East. What is that, like 1 a.m. for you guys, unfortunately, or something like that?
It's an early time.
It's a late one. But will take place in Austin, Texas. Great town, by the way. I've been to Austin. Love the town. Let's get to the first fight of the evening. Lightweight division, Sage Northcutt against T-Ball Gotti. I think we gave our picks away, Lewis, but I'm going Sage Northcutt. Nothing so far in Gotti's 4-fight UFC experience has showed me that he's ready to take on somebody like Sage Northcutt. So I'm going to go with Super Sage.
Yep, agreed. I'm going with Sage as well. I think he's just got a bit too much in the tank for him. So I'm going Sage all the way this one.
Brandon Davis against Steven Peterson, the featherweight division. I'm going to go Steve Peterson. I think that having that kind of the back pocket of being a brown belt, I think is going to be an X factor in this one, and which, again, should be an entertaining bout, but I go with Steven Peterson. I'm
going to go with Peterson as well. I think, with this fight, it's like we said earlier, if the stand-up is 50-50 and it ends up going to the ground, he's got an advantage there. So he's got more ways to win the fight, so I'm going to go for him.
Thiago Alves against Curtis Melander. I'm going to go with the upset here, Lewis. I'm going to go with the newcomer. I almost never pick a newcomer in the UFC, but I think Curtis, his size, his strength, his height, I mean, he's going to be 6 inches taller than Thiago Alves. And Alves on the downside of his career. I'm going to go with Curtis Melander in this one.
I'm really torn on this one. I'm really, really torn because I like Melander, but at the same time, I think there's a big thing of, your first fight in the UFC. And against such an experienced guy as well, I think it's really close for me, but I'm going to go Alves.
James Vick against Francisco Trinaldo. I think this one's a very tough fight to pick, but I'm going to go with Francisco Trinaldo. I think his ability to grind out a win may negate the explosiveness of James Vick. So I'm going to go with the Brazilian Francisco Trinaldo in this one.
I'm going to go with James Vick, and I'm going to go for a prediction of a knockout.
Derek Lewis against Marcin Tybura. It's the Black Beast in this one. That's the pick.
Yeah, I don't want to give a prediction on how, but I see it being the Black Beast all day. Derek Lewis. And I hope he does win as well. Yeah, I really like Derek Lewis, and he's a big character, and I hope to see him win on Saturday.
Don Cerrone against Yancy Medeiros at welterweight for the main event of the evening. Going with Yancy Medeiros. He's the man on the roll right now. He is fighting very confidently. He's fighting, I feel, kind of not quite worry-free, but I think not having that weight cut to worry about has really freed the striking nature and the brutality that is Yancy Medeiros. And I think right now, Don Cerrone is just not at the level that he was. He's still capable of winning this fight, but I think right now it's Yancy's time, and this is going to be, if people didn't see his last fight, again, which was on the undercard, again, fight of the year in my opinion, I think they're going to find out who Yancy Medeiros is come Saturday night.
I think this is going to be a brilliant fight. I'm going for Yancy as well. Cowboy definitely is capable, but I just think with the momentum and Cowboy being on 3 losses in a row, I'm going to go for Yancy on this one, but it's going to be close. I think it's going to be a good fight.
All right, Lewis, any other final thoughts and shout-outs and where people can follow you on social media here as we end the program?
Yeah, so guys, just want to give a big shout-out first of all to MMA UK. Obviously giving us this opportunity that the tag for us is at We Are MMA UK. You can follow me on Facebook. My Twitter is at Leo1S2. And give me a follow. I'm constantly talking crap about MMA. Whether you think I'm right or wrong, I'm constantly talking crap on this. So give me a follow. And Jim, thanks for having me on. Really appreciate the time, buddy.
Yeah, no problem. Again, thanks for filling in this week for Kayla. Once again, I'm your host, Jim Graham. Follow me on Twitter at Jim Graham. As Lewis said, at We Are MMA UK on Twitter, as well as on Facebook. And, of course, we're on MMA World as well, like the page with 2 extra Ds. So MMA World, 2 extra Ds on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram as well. Please like and follow all those pages as well. We really appreciate you doing so and appreciate coming in and tuning in to Beyond the Cage once again this week. So for Lewis Smith, I am Jim Graham. Thank you for listening to another edition of Beyond the Cage. Goodbye, everybody.